Composition from the first note. Cultivating agency in the Continuum Approach. In the Continuum music pedagogy, musical learning is understood not as a linear ascent toward technical mastery, but as a living field that the student enters, explores, and returns to across a lifetime. Progress is measured by clarity of engagement, sustained curiosity, and the gradual emergence of personal musical identity rather than by the speed of skill acquisition or external benchmarks. Within this framework, composition is not reserved for advanced stages. It is introduced at the earliest possible moment, often on the very first lessons with an instrument. By inviting students to create from the outset, whether with open strings, simple triads, or carefully chosen intervals, the Continuum Approach places creativity first and positions self-learning, self-discipline, and self-motivation as central outcomes. The teacher's ultimate aim is to guide the student toward a future in which the tutor is no longer required, not through abandonment, but through the deliberate cultivation of independent musical agency. For a beginning string player, composition can begin with the open strings alone. The student is invited to invent a short phrase that mixes plucked, pizzicato, and bowed notes, exploring the contrasting colors and resonances that arise from the same four pitches. The restrictions are deliberately narrow and matched to the student's current physical and conceptual capacities. Only open strings, a limited number of notes, and perhaps a simple instruction to include both pizzicato and arco. The resulting piece may be only a few bars long, a brief phrase that can be repeated, varied, or extended, or it may grow into a longer form through the addition of repeated sections. The student is encouraged both to hold the music in memory and to notate it, however simply, so that the act of composition becomes an interplay between internalization and external representation. In this way, the first compositional experiences simultaneously develop listening, physical control, memory, and the beginnings of score literacy, without the pressure of correct repertoire. Keyboard or other pitched instrument students may begin with the notes of a single triad, most commonly the C major triad, CEG, though any key-specific triad can be chosen to align seamlessly with concurrent technical work or with the student's preferred tonal center. The same principle applies. The available materials are restricted according to ability and current needs. A student who struggles with hand independence might be asked to compose using only the right hand within a fixed five-finger position. A student whose rhythmic sense is less secure might work with a limited set of note values. Intervals become a natural next step. Once the student can reliably produce a perfect fifth or a major third, those intervals can form the sole vocabulary of a new short composition. The restrictions are never arbitrary. They are diagnostic and developmental, chosen to strengthen emerging strengths or to address specific weaknesses while still leaving ample room for personal expression. As students gain experience, the parameters expand in proportion to their growing capacity. Older or more advanced learners may be invited to specify bow directions, dynamic contours, tempo markings, or even emotional character. A composition might be required to begin piano and end forte, to employ only down bows for a particular section, or to convey a named feeling through the limited materials already available. At every stage, the teacher remains attentive to the student's readiness. Some tutors prefer to set the restrictions themselves. Others invite the student to help choose them, negotiating the boundaries together. This shared decision-making is itself pedagogical. It models the self-awareness and self-regulation that Continuum seeks to foster. The student learns not only to compose within limits, but to recognize which limits are currently useful and which may soon be released. Throughout, the teacher's role is carefully defined. The Continuum tutor does not impose a predetermined compositional method or demand stylistic conformity. Instead, the teacher designs or co-designs constraints that keep the creative task within the student's zone of proximal development, then steps back to allow the student to invent, revise, memorize, notate, and perform. Feedback focuses on the student's own intentions and on the musical consequences of their choices, rather than on external ideals of correctness. In this process, the student experiences the satisfaction of authorship from the earliest lessons. The piece, however short, belongs to them. That ownership fuels intrinsic motivation far more effectively than external rewards or the deferred promise of future repertoire. The long-term goal is explicit, the progressive transfer of responsibility from teacher to student until the tutor is no longer required. This is distinct from mere independence of repertoire choice. It is the internalization of the entire learning cycle. Diagnosis of need, selection of materials, invention within limits, evaluation, revision, and further invention. Composition, introduced early and sustained throughout the continuum of study, is one of the most powerful vehicles for this transfer. Each short phrase, each restricted triad exercise, each interval-based invention becomes a miniature laboratory in which the student practices the very skills of self-direction that will eventually render the teacher's presence unnecessary. By placing composition at the threshold of instrumental learning, the continuum approach affirms that creativity is not a secondary ornament, but the primary medium through which technical skill, oral awareness, and personal agency develop together. The open string, the simple triad, the single interval. These are not preparatory exercises awaiting later, real music. They are already the materials of authentic musical thought. When students are invited to shape them into phrases of their own, they begin at once to inhabit the continuum of musicianship as active participants rather than as passive recipients. In that participation lies the quiet revolution of the continuum pedagogy, the steady cultivation of musicians who can and will continue without us. From the new book, The Continuum Approach to Music, Foundations, a Pedagogical Framework for Musical Learning by Sarnia de la Maré FRSA.